technique on creative finance deals that myself and my team have coined Weimer Method deals. And it is unlimited 0% interest cash in your bank account. So how do you like that for a clickbait headline? This is a question that I asked at the mastermind. How would $1 million cash in your bank account at 0% interest change your business? I know it changed ours because before we were always struggling with liquidity, balancing, well, I kind of want to do those flips. Well, now we have to pay this in marketing, or I want to up the marketing spend. And I also want to hire that A player that I can't really afford because they want a high base. And like managing all of that in a startup in your business is total chaos. And so I always struggled with what is that right amount of liquidity to hold in the bank account? I don't know. It's a bit subjective, right? To your risk tolerance, your balance sheet, and everything you have going on. But this has completely changed the game for us. So with this strategy, we raised over $2 million in liquidity at 0% interest just in 1 year. We've only been doing this a year. Over $2 million at 0% interest. You're able to pay off more expensive debt on your properties. Of course, like I said, hire the next A player, buy more cash flowing properties. You can even fund your own cash value life insurance policy or put it in a high yield bank account and earn 4.5% savings interest rate or whatever you fancy. That's what you can use this money for. But the disclaimer is you can't be an idiot about it because depending on your state, your title company, there's going to be a lot of red tape on what you can and can't do. And at the end of the day, it's still debt. This is tax-free debt. Yes, it's at 0% interest, but at the end of the day, it is still debt. So you have to use it responsibly. You don't want to be going and buying a bunch of Bitcoin or whatever, going to Vegas and putting it all on black and all that stupid stuff. You do not want to get over leveraged with this. And if there's anything that I've learned in my short time doing this strategy, your title agent or your closing attorney is like 80% of the pie. So the one thing you're going to need to do this strategy is rental properties with equity. You will not be able to do this unless you have rental properties with equity. That is a big part of what keeps a lot of people from doing this, but I'm going to show you guys a couple tricks. If you have a couple properties with maybe not that much equity, how you can do it. Okay, so what in the heck is Weimer Method? It's a substitution of collateral for your seller's note. So what does that mean? Okay, let's say I'm negotiating a creative finance deal. I have this nice looking single family home at the top, and I'm paying out the seller's equity over time. I get really good terms. Okay, great. The cash offer doesn't work for you, but we're able to come up to your price in payments over time. So that seller now has a note of an IOU and a promissory note of, hey, I'm going to pay you $500 a month or whatever it is until your note's paid in full. Well, before we close on that property, on that creative finance deal, we're going to take that seller's note and we're actually going to secure it against a completely different property, usually in second position. So I would take that note. Hey, Mr. Seller, we're going to buy this single family home and we're going to take your note and we're going to secure it against a fourplex that we own that's cash flowing. We're going to close, we're going to buy that single family home, and then we're going to sell that single family home. So what did I do? When I sell that property now, I don't have to pay that note off because it's against a different property entirely. So then I get to keep all of that liquidity from that single family house, and I get to keep the benefits of the note because it's in that second position against that fourplex. So here is how this strategy was born and why I don't think a lot of people are talking about this. I know a lot of people aren't talking about this, but why people haven't ventured into this realm. We have just done a lot more creative finance deals than your average person, and it's a really hard thing to scale. It's really hard to teach people how to do cash deals and negotiate well on those and novations, let alone terms deals. It's a lot harder. It's a more advanced tactic to get a seller to agree on a 0% interest note than it is to buy it cash. So the problem we were getting, especially in 2022 when interest rates changed, is we got a lot of creative finance deals, a lot more than normal. During COVID, it was all cash, cash, cash. But as soon as interest rates changed and the market started declining, all of a sudden, if a seller was stuck on a number, we could close that gap and we could get that deal with the right creative finance structure. But many of those properties were properties we didn't want to hold long term. They were in areas where we didn't really like. Maybe they didn't cash flow as a rental. So that's the problem is I'm negotiating and I'm getting really good terms potentially, but if it doesn't cash flow, I don't really want to own many properties that don't cash flow. A lot of people would say that that's just a no-go, that to not buy any properties and to not buy a property unless it cash flows. I'm okay if it's in an A area to buy something that breaks even or even is a slight loser because it's, again, in that location where the appreciation upside is bigger. But what about if it's not? Well, in the past, if we just couldn't cash flow on a wholesale deal, buyers wouldn't buy it. On a creative finance deal to try to wholesale it, buyers wouldn't buy it. So we would have to decide, are we going to just cancel the contract or are we going to hold that as a rental and potentially lose money every month or own a rental in the middle of nowhere that nobody wants? And you can't really refinance either because then that gets rid of your really low interest rate and your good terms, right? So your equity is locked up forever. You feel kind of a prisoner to this property. So let's look at an example. This is one we did not do Weimer method on, illustrates the point. So we bought it sub 2 first position 112. The remaining seller's equity was $253,000. That seller accepted $100 a month at 0% interest until it was paid in full, which is a note term length of 201 years. 201 years. It rents for $2,100 a month. After the payment and expenses, it roughly cash flows about $550 a month, okay? The problem is I can never sell this property. I can't touch it. I'm locked in. That note is going to keep getting paid. If I sell or refinance, I lose this incredible magic 201-year note at 0% interest of $100 a month. So I'm trapped. I have to keep this property for the long term if I want to keep the benefits of that note.
That just strikes me as bananas that somebody accepted that. I mean, you can go crazy stuff like $100 a month for 201 years with no balloon. That's insane.
So I hope that this expands your mind on what's possible, because I'm going to get to the end about objections or why in the world would someone ever agree to this. But anything is possible with creative finance. That's why I think it's the coolest. This is just this deal is already great. But what if we can get the benefit of just that note and not be tied to this property forever? That'd make it even better, right? And we can get all that liquidity up front.
Our great grandkids are going to be like, what an idiot. What did he sign us up for?
So the how, right? 4 steps of paperwork and disclosure. First of all, it's a substitution of collateral clause in your contract. If you guys want to take screenshots of this, go ahead. This is the verbiage that we use. Again, depending on your state, you're going to need to run this by the title company. They're going to have their specific rules and potentially an attorney as well. So please do not use this verbatim. But this is exactly what our purchase agreement says in the creative finance terms section. When we're defining the payments and the term length and all that stuff, it says the second position note can be subordinated at the buyer's sole discretion and or with a substitution of collateral to a property of equal or greater value. Equal or greater value. Very important. So that's part 1. That's in your purchase agreement. After that purchase agreement is signed, we didn't specify the property. We just say we have the right to do it. That goes in your purchase agreement. After it's signed, then we bring to the seller what property we think is best to secure their note against. So we send them an addendum which specifies the proposed property. It looks something like this. Sorry, I know that's a little blurry. So for the people that are probably going to listen to this on the podcast, it's the second position note will be subordinated and or substituted as collateral with 11 South Mike Street in Boise, a property of equal or greater value. If the seller elects to obtain a new title insurance policy for the subordinated property, the seller shall bear the expense, and the seller shall comply with all documentation requests from title to complete the subordination and or substitution of collateral. So the reason we wait until after it's already signed to specify the exact property is because we don't want our team or our guys worrying while they're negotiating with the seller, what property am I going to put it against? It just adds another layer that they don't need to worry about and focus on. So we have a manager call after the fact and say, hey, this is the property that we're going to put the note against. Do you have any questions? Of course, they're going to come with questions. So then step 3, title completes the search on the proposed property. So this one, that would be 11 South Mike Street. Title completes that search so they can show the seller, hey, these are the other notes secured against the property, or this is how much is owed against that property, right? We're not trying to work one over on everybody putting $1 million in notes against a property only worth $500K. They have to approve the amount of debt that is owed against that property to make sure they have a sufficient equity position. Exactly like a HELOC would work. When you apply for a HELOC, they have to make sure that you're up to 80% loan to value or whatever the bank requires.
Who's they? You lost me there. They have to approve.
The seller.
They have the ultimate approval.
Yes. So the title company will make them sign at closing a separate substitution of collateral agreement, which is just basically a deed of trust that says this is what your note is going against. So they have to verbally okay it so that title can prepare the closing documents. And then lastly, hold harmless. A document is signed by all parties. This is just a cover our ass for both us and for the seller. Again, we're not trying to hide anything at all. We're just over disclosing, and we're telling them exactly what we're going to do. We're telling them why this benefits us and why this benefits them. And I'm going to get into some of those objections here. But first I have a video.
Struggling to keep cash in your bank account? This is how you can get $325,000 cash at 0% interest. We're here at 13409 West Paint Street in Boise. It's another Weimer Method deal at 0% interest. Despite what you may have seen on social media, text messaging is not dead. This was a texting lead, and when we met with the homeowner, he didn't have any obvious pain or motivation, just a number stuck in his head that he needed to get. We were too far apart on a cash offer, but we asked him the magic question. What if we could come up to your number with payments over time? So we locked up this deal at $325,000 purchase price with $1,800 a month payments to him at 0% interest. But here's the cherry on top. We used Weimer Method to put the seller's note against a different property and sold this one for $350,000. After realtor fees and commissions and closing costs, we made almost nothing. But now we have $325,000 cash that we can pay off other debt, buy other properties, or reinvest into marketing.
That example illustrates the power of what we're talking about, right? That property, the rent was about $1,800 a month. If my payment's $1,800 a month and I got to pay a property manager and I got repairs and I got insurance and all that fun stuff, I'm going to be in the red at least $400 or $500, right? So that's why the strategy is so powerful. If it cash flowed, those tend to be the ones that we keep, but the ones that don't, we like to use this strategy. Okay, another example, seller finance, $15,000 down, $1,800 a month payments, would not cash flow, but 0% interest. So bought it at $270. We ended up selling this right just shy of $350, and we used Weimer Method to secure the seller's note of $255, right, the $270 minus the $15K down, against a fourplex in second position at closing. We flipped the property and got $326K cash at closing. This is on a creative finance deal. When we pulled this off for the first time, my brain completely melted because I just had no idea that something like this was possible. And it is, I can't tell you how much of a game changer it is to have this kind of cheap liquidity at your disposal. But that's not all, Billy Mays style. This is the gift that keeps on giving, because when you're in the business now of buying and selling notes, about 1 in 5, roughly, it's been our experience, will come back to you asking for money sooner. So like that seller will say, hey, I know that our note is for $255,000 at $1,800 a month, but I have health complications. I think I'm going to die soon. I want to buy a new property, whatever it is. Can you give me more money sooner? You can get some insane discounts on your note by buying that note back and doing additional principal payments. So for example, I could go to him and say, sure, I'll give you $100,000 if you knock off $200,000 on the note balance. And that is all pure profit, baby. So imagine spending $200,000 on a credit card and only having to pay half of it back. That's what this is like. Totally hacking the system. Everybody understand that concept? This is arguably the best part, because you're just trading paper. Like, this is the easiest profit you'll ever make, is just answering an email about how much money they need and make a deal work. So at scale, this was a huge one that we bought, 6 townhomes in 4 lots, 1.3 million purchase price. This one had a big down payment. That was his thing that he needed to get. But I didn't have any other properties that were equal or greater value to this with enough equity position at the time. So, what the heck do we do now? Well, we got the seller to agree to use 5 of our properties as collateral. So you can see the different amounts that we used there. That's exactly what it looked like on the HUD, on the closing statement, of the different amounts of notes that we put against our other properties. So we split it up. We split up that, it was about $500,000 seller second position at 0% interest, and we split it up into different chunks and put it against different properties to satisfy the amount of equity that the seller wanted to see. So that deal, we made $400K and got another $500,000 at 0% interest.
You said you wanted a big down payment. Where did that come from?
So that we money raised.
Okay, you just raised from private investors for that.
Yeah, because the deal had equity. So our play here was to split it up. It was all in one parcel. So we did a survey and we split them up into individual townhomes and sold them off.
Okay, got it.
But if we did that without doing the substitution of collateral, I would have had to pay off that seller's $500K at 0% interest.
Right.
And that would have sucked, which is how we used to do it before. We used to do deals like this and really just celebrate it, right? Because, wow, our carrying costs were low because we negotiated that. We were just selling ourselves way short. Because what if you can get the benefits of that note? You don't have to sell it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, deal killers. So this was the most common question at Collective Genius as well. It's like, why in the world would a seller ever agree to this? Well, it's the same concept when you first get into wholesaling and you're like, why in the world would somebody ever sell their property at a discount? It's the same conversation with novations when you're like, why would they let me list the property on the MLS when they could just do it with an agent? It's the same exact concept of why does CarMax exist? People will trade equity, convenience, terms if they trust you and if you help them get to whatever their goal is. And there are so many people out there that just have their head set on a number and they don't care how long they need to wait to make that number. That's the only thing that they care about. So that's why this works, is we're just coming up to whatever the seller wants after exhausting cash as an option, and we're getting it done. Nobody else can do that. So I know it's hard to understand. We would never put ourselves in a seller's head and make that decision for ourselves. But again, it just comes down to a number thing. So here are the most common questions and objections. Why would a seller ever agree to this? I'm not in first position. I don't know that property. I know mine. What if you defaulted? How am I protected? How much is owed? What happens when you sell my property? So a lot of these are the same questions that you get when you're doing a regular creative finance deal. But how we like to phrase it to sellers is, hey, look, your note is going against another property that's already remodeled. It's already cash flowing more. It is of equal or greater value. Now, we send them pictures of the property to show what kind of condition it's in. And 9 times out of 10, it's nicer than the one we're buying. So yes, you're in second position. But then if they say, hey, the title report comes back and they're like, oh, I need more equity to feel secure. Okay, then we just have that conversation. Well, how much equity do you need to feel secure? Most of the time, they don't know. They're trusting you. Okay, so then it's just a conversation of, well, do you want us to add another property as collateral? What does that right balance look like for you? And usually we can sort it out when they understand that you're not trying to pull one over on them. You're trying to make sure that they're secured and protected, because at the end of the day, that's all they care about. They just want to make sure that they're not going to have to foreclose on you, or their notice is not going to get paid back. The same objections that you would have with any regular creative finance deal.
So Ryan, you would have to make sure on the properties you're getting the notes on that the first loan is a pretty good one, because you wouldn't want to refinance that, right?
Well, not necessarily, right? Because what's the blended rate?
Well, no, like if it was like a DSCR loan, as an example, with a balloon, where you're like you have to refinance, most likely, that could mess it up.
Yes. You wouldn't want to do that unless you were okay, unless you got an arm without a balloon and you were just okay with the rate adjusting. So it does depend on what kind of loan you have. Yes. But the beauty of this, John, is there have been a couple times where we have pipped a property and then like a year goes by, and then we had this happen recently where I had a note against a property that I really didn't want to keep anymore. And so we went back to the seller and we just said, hey, can we move the note again to another property?
Right.
It's fine.
And they might, that makes sense.
So things can change. But the key to executing this, just like with any creative finance offers, it all starts with exhausting the cash offer. If you don't do a good job in your sales process of beating up that cash offer and really emphasizing why the cash offer is too low to accomplish whatever it is they want, you're not going to have a delta to close. You're not going to have a gap to close in their mind of why this would work for them or why it's valuable to them. So an example for us, like putting terms aside for a second, but like if we go from a cash offer to a novation too quickly, the seller will not understand the difference. They'll think that you just came up higher in your offer price. So you can't, with a novation, we're not the ones buying the property. We're listing it on the MLS. We got to do showings and have reasonable access. The cash offer gives them the most amount of certainty, but they got to take the biggest hit on equity to be able to do that, right? They have to sell at a bigger discount for that cash offer. So just like in that example with cash offer versus novations, it's the same thing, a cash offer versus a terms deal. We have to make sure that we establish, hey, it doesn't sound like that cash offer is going to work for you. It's too low. What if there was a way that I could come up to your number and payments over time? You'd be surprised how many people are open to some kind of creative structure like that. I can't explain this next one. I don't know why it is, but a lot of these have come from outbound channels. I think some of it just has to do with the fact that with outbound, a lot of times you're the only ones meeting with the homeowner. So it does make it a little bit easier when you're the only one establishing that trust, and they're not filling out a million web forms online, getting contacted by everyone and their mother about different cash offers. Again, we don't have our acquisition managers pick the property while they're signing the creative finance contract. We just put that general clause in there, and then we come back later with a manager call to establish what that property is. And then let's say, like James said, okay, 201 years, why would anybody ever do that? Well, if they come back to us and they say, I'm not going to be alive that long, and I don't want my kids to get payments when I pass away, I want this cash sooner, and I want a 7-year balloon or a 10-year balloon. It's all, you just pull a different level. Well, Mr. Seller, we're really able to come up to your price that you wanted because we're buying the terms. So if we shorten that term length, then I'm going to have to take a bigger reduction in the price to be able to do that for you. Or I'm going to have to get the monthly payments lower. You can pull all these different levers to make it work for the seller that you're working with. But in our baseline creative finance contract, this is very important. It's always spelled out payments until note paid in full. We don't list what the term length is, because a lot of times when you're going through the contract with your sellers, they'll trigger on, oh my gosh, that's 201 years. They'll trigger on that. And then all of a sudden it'll make it a part of negotiation. So we just put until it's paid in full. If they say that they want their money sooner, all of a sudden it puts us in a stronger position to be able to negotiate. Does that make sense, James? Cool. I think that's it. That's all I had. What questions do you guys have?
Have you ever gone back after, and so like, let's say you didn't set it up properly in the beginning. Have you gone back to a seller and said, hey, like, we put your note on a different property, basically?
Yes.
They've been open to that?
Yep. I was just telling John, you might have been on another call, but that's happened a few times where it wasn't that we didn't set it up correctly. We just decided, hey, there's a property with the note against that we want to sell,
Yeah.
that we don't want anymore. And so we go back to them and we say, hey, we're planning on selling this property. Are you good if we secure it against this other property instead? So far, we haven't had anybody object to that.
I mean, I guess like, sure, I know that's 0%. They have no benefit to allowing you to do that. So do you throw them another couple $1,000 or something, or?
You could. Yeah, you could. We haven't had to do that, but absolutely you could, right? Or you could say, hey, if you let me secure it against a different property, I'll increase your payments $200 a month.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I have a property like this. I have a 0% note that's pretty substantial, but like the lady wants it to be paid off, like badly. So you gave me an idea when you said like you could offer to pay it off at like 50% of the value. Could do that. I hadn't even thought about that. Or yeah, throw another few $1,000 and reassign it to a different property if I wanted to sell it.
That's exact. I would approach her and I would say, hey, what if there was a way that we could get you your money sooner?
Mm-hmm.
Could we have that discussion? I don't know if it's even possible, but what if we could work something out?
Totally. Yeah, I love that. It's a good idea.
That's pure profit, baby. Those are the best kind of deals.
Mm-hmm.
What have you used it for, Ryan? Just out of curiosity, like when you get these.
Most of the time it's to buy more cash flowing properties or to pay down more expensive debt. So like I could use that 0% and pay off a 7.5% DSCR loan.
Right. I guess you just run the risk if you get into a situation like, I mean, it's not like it matters really. I mean, they agreed to the note, but if you get into a situation where they do really need it and you're like, oh, now I have to come up with, you know, 200, 300, 400 grand. If it's a big one, I guess that would be the risk. But
What do you mean by that?
like if they really wanted you to come up with the money and like you used it all to go buy other properties or something, and then you got like you spread it out and it was a lot of money and they were requesting it. It's not like you have to give it to them or anything, but I guess that would be I mean, you could just say like, I can't do it. So
Yeah, which with one particular seller we've only had one seller where this became an issue after the fact so far. And it's totally right. Like let's say you went to a Chase or a Wells Fargo, you got a $500,000 loan on your house, and then a year in, Chase was like, hey, remember that loan that we gave you? Well, we need you to pay it off earlier. You'd be like, to hell with that. I can't do it. This is the loan agreement we signed. So they have no, legal ground to stand on once they sign the paperwork. Again, it's an exchange of value. The only reason we structured it that way is because they were stuck on a number.
right.
And a lot of times the number you're giving them can be at market value or higher, right? That video of that property, we sold it at 350, we bought it at 325. So it was basically a net zero profit deal. So that was the only way to make it work. But that is the beauty of it, right? Because that is showing up as $0 profit on the P&L, so you don't have to pay taxes either.
Right.
It is shocking to me that nobody else has talked about this before. Even in our mastermind, people were like, and I really do think it's just that initial, how in the world would you get somebody to agree to this kind of thing? And it just takes practice. That's all. Just takes practice. A lot of
I mean,
what
it's doing it anyway, you know?
Totally. But that's why, like, what we have a baseline creative finance contract, and it has this stuff just in our baseline contract. So just because we can substitute this with your note with a property of equal or greater value doesn't mean we always do it. Like if we want to keep the property, or if we don't have another property with enough equity to make it work, then we just close on it like normal, right? It just gives you the option.
Like 90 combined LTV, or do you go up, like how high do you guys go up on them?
Yeah, our rule of thumb is 80.
80?
Yeah. I mean, to be totally honest with you, most of the sellers that are willing to agree to a creative finance deal, right? They're believing in you, your brand, your ability to make the payments, right? You're putting a renter in there. They're the ones that are going to be able to be making the payments anyways. So that's why I said, don't be stupid about it, because you could probably over leverage a property, and like sometimes sellers wouldn't even ask questions. So that's your responsibility to not be a jackass, or else bad things could happen.
So fun being a jackass though, you know?
Have you done this in a scenario where you're also getting a new loan against the property?
Let's say I'm buying a house with a conventional loan or something, and then the seller's.
Yeah, whatever kind of loan, right? It could be, I guess, hard money. It could be DSCR or whatever. So like either there's no current mortgage against the property, or they just don't want to do some too for whatever reason. Like you get a new loan for X number of dollars to pay off their current mortgage and put money in their pocket, and then the rest of the equity that they have, you would do as a note, and then basically just do the same thing, security against a different property.
So private money is a short answer. No, I haven't used a bank or a lender to do that, because I'm sure there's somebody out there that would do it. I don't know who that is.
Well, I don't see why they wouldn't do it. because there's no issue for the lender. Like because the seller's note would be against a different property anyway.
Yeah, but it still goes on your balance sheet as a debt you have to pay, right? So if the lender, whatever, let's say it's a DSCR loan, you still have to meet a certain debt service coverage ratio, right? With whatever it's going to rent for. So they would still include that payment as a part of the property.
How would they even
underwriting.
know about it? They wouldn't even know.
Well, it's in your contract.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, we've pulled that stuff, James. I forget how, but we've pulled private notes. I don't know if it shows up on your credit report or something. I don't know.
Not well, yeah. If it's recorded, I guess. Yeah, interesting.
Because we had a guy in San Diego who had that kind of thing on like 10 of his condos, and we hit him with all the payments.
So my experience, James, is most lenders don't want you to, if it's like a portfolio or a hard money type of lender or any kind of DSCR product, they don't want you to have anything in second position. Already a high leverage loan.
Yeah, so I mean that's my point because you're doing it such that it would be a lien on a different property, so they wouldn't even see it, right? Because I was thinking like, I mean, you also have like, I guess you call it like a seller's subordination where you get a loan, but the seller then has a note against the property, but you do it like the day after you close, like a way that you could do sort of seller financing, but if they want like a bigger down payment.
Yeah.
So instead of securing it to the subject property, you could just secure it to a different property. Like if you plan on it being like a flip or something like that and just increase the liquidity that you get.
You could try like that big example of the townhomes where we had to come up with $550K down. I guess I could have gone to a lender and said, hey, we need to cash out the seller's first position and then net him $550K and then he's going to finance 500 on the back end. I just went for private money because it was easier.
Right. And it would be secured against other properties. So like, yeah, maybe the lender wouldn't even care in that case.
Yeah. I do think though, most lenders, if you try to describe what you're trying to do here, their head would explode.
Like, what the hell is that? Yeah. So like the real benefit here is notes that are at like 0% or like really low percentages.
Doesn't have to be.
It could be higher, but then you're kind of losing some of the benefit of it because you're paying.
If you got a 5% note, anything that's lower than market that you can use to pay. I mean, honestly, let's think about your most expensive debt. If you have a car loan, if you have credit card debt, if you have a business line of credit right now, those rates are pretty high, like 16 to 18% sometimes. If you have a personal line of credit you're using to fund real estate deals, those can be like anywhere from 10 to 15%, right? Oh, yeah. Whatever is cheaper than your most expensive debt, it's still worth doing.